Hey guys, Anime Fanfics here. This is chapters 53 to 55 of Obito's redemption story by Yaboy Assassin on Wattpad. Links to all stories are in the description below, and make sure to like the video and subscribe to my channel. Chapter 53. In one single instant, two individuals of amazing power clashed. One a revered shinobi of Konoha, haunted by the actions he committed in the past, while the other was another revered ninja of Konoha, one who's had his own hardships and failures. Their physical bodies not only clashed, but their memories, their feelings, and their hardships. They both wielded kunai, and the scraped and clanged from hitting each other as blurs of chakra shot through the forest. They had been fighting so fast that they had gone of several hundreds of miles from their original fighting place. The fighting was so intense that they had barely landed in the ground, and most of the fight was spent in the air, despite the fact that neither of them could fly. Finally, they separated, landing in crouches after skidding along the forest floor. But it didn't last long, and Kakashi was the first to act. He charged electricity into two kunai and launched them at Obito. This again? He thought, but, to his surprise, the kunai split to opposite ends of each other and on the sides of Obito. Obito quickly glances at both of them with his enhanced eyes just as their true purpose began to start. Electricity surges from each kunai, but Obito was already in the air, his Sharingan already feed him what was going on beforehand. More lightning shoots out of the kunai, and Obito notices that it was going to miss him, but not accidentally. A trap. He realizes in surprise and astonishment, but it is too late, and lightning begins to zip around him as he hits the ground. When it finished, it formed a large cage of deadly lightning that, from what Obito could see, had a tremendous amount of chakra in. He hadn't expected technique like this to come from Kakashi. A smirk found its way onto his face, and he formed the ram seal. His own chakra began to flare, and Kakashi sensed that as he rushed forward. "You won't escape," he declares, a Chidori forming in his hand as Obito had begun to move forward, and Kakashi knew he was going to slip through his technique. Anakusha. A human-sized, black portal opened up like a vortex. This was the ultimate technique that Kakashi possessed, which allowed him to connect himself to space all around someone. A similar portal opened behind Obito, who was close to the lightning cage. Lighting Hound. The technique in Kakashi's palm changes, and he lets loose a beast made of pure lightning that rushed through the portal and began to come on the other side of the portal as Obito was only centimeters of touching the lightning cage. Kakashi lets his portal close and performs another Chidori just as Obito's hand finally reached his cage and began to slip through. He knows the weakness to my power. Obito realizes, slipping more out of the cage as Kakashi appeared in front of him with a Chidori in hand. But he's too late. Obito slips through the cage and the lightning hits it head-on, causing it to fade away. Damn it, my timing is off, Kakashi realized as Obito slips through his body. They both skid to a halt, and Kakashi cancels all of his remaining techniques and turns back to face Kakashi while Obito did the same. "That was a good attempt, Kakashi," Obito praises, clapping slowly in a mocking fashion. Kakashi keeps his cool, despite himself. Kakashi knew that it was his timing that had saved Obito and reviewed his mistake in his head over and over. He was going to make sure he wouldn't make it again. They stared intently at each other before, in an instant, they clashed again. Kunai in hand, sparks flew between the two and they gritted their teeth, trying to gain leverage over the other. Suddenly, Obito ducked underneath his strike and tried to trip the copy ninja by his feet. Kakashi saw this and leapt into the air, only to get kicked in the gut hard enough for him to soar through the air 50 meters away. Obito had spun quickly to deliver the kick, and Kakashi couldn't counter it. He landed harshly on his back, but the pain did not impede his movements as he flipped to his feet, pulling out two more kunai to, again, clash with Obito. The copy ninja was left on the defensive. Block, meet, dodge, block, dodge, meet. Obito's strikes were ferocious and fast. Kakashi could barely react even with his enhanced eyes that enabled him to see what an opponent would do before they knew themselves. He figured that if Obito hadn't no opening in his form, he would have to make one. Chakra shot through his kunai and turned into lightning just before he met Obito's kunai, and he sliced clean through it, forcing Obito to duck uncomfortably under it. Finally, Kakashi slammed his foot right into Obito's face, knocking him on his back so hard that his feet shot in the air and he was basically sliding back on his head. Kakashi sought his opportunity and tried to leap onto the Uchiha, but Obito flipped to his feet so fast that a raging wind had shot around them. A surprise noise slipped out of Kakashi's mouth when he slipped through his teammate. He hadn't been expecting it and it cost him. Obito turned himself midway in the air and aimed a kick at the side of Kakashi's head, but he was able to put his arm out to block it but heard a sickening pop afterwards and felt a whole lot of pain. He landed a couple of meters away on his side, clutching his wrist tightly with a grimace of pain on his face. He looked down at his right wrist, carefully feeling around it so he could see which bone had been broken and see if it could be set right. He was about to attempt to get back to his feet, but slow footsteps coming toward him freezes his movements and he looks up to see Obito walking up to him. He glared at his friend watching his slow, confident gait and realized that Obito wouldn't try and attack him again. He would use that to his advantage. Obito stopped a couple of meters away from him and their eyes locked to each other. Neither said a word for a bit, only Kakashi's heavy, pained breathing filled the silence. "Do you see now?" Obito said, voice deep. "Do you see the clear separation of our strength? You cannot beat me, Kakashi. Give up." Kakashi didn't answer verbally, but physically. He had quickly removed his hand that was holding his wrist together, and felt another painful pop that had caused him to wince. He slammed his hand onto the ground and seals spread out underneath them. Summoning Jutsu. A puff of smoke erupted the battlefield and Obito leaped up, aiming to free himself from the smoke and the dogs that had popped out of it, trying to grab a hold of him with their teeth. He escaped narrowly, landing safely a couple of meters away while Kakashi slowly got to his feet, now not holding his wrist. He had managed to fix the wrist back together and tied it up with bandages, but it wouldn't last forever. Especially, if he were to move it around a bunch. He ignored the pain in his arm and flexed it, trying to see how much motion he could use without too much pain, or the feeling that his broken bones were scraping against one another. "So, you still plan to fight, huh?" Obito asked, slowly. Kakashi let a food pill slip down his throat before he answered. "I plan to beat you," he said, feeling the pill boost his reserves and edge the pain away. In his injured hand he conjured a Chidori, the lightning glowing up the dull battlefield. Triple X. Itachi and Shisui stood in silence after the two teens had finished explaining their presence, knowledge, and skills to them. Finally, after a long silence, Itachi let out a long sigh and lowered his head slightly. This certainly wasn't what he expected to hear today. No matter the era, it's always conflict. Mitsuki blinked. "You believe us?" he asked. Itachi nodded. "I do. This seems far too elaborate to be something someone could make up." Their abilities they displayed showed that as well, more specifically, the Uchiha girl. He looked at her long and hard. That was his niece, his brother's daughter. He wanted to smile, but a feeling in his gut from having felt her chakra made the feeling go away. Something felt off about her. Shisui scratched his head and sighed himself. Damn. Even the future can't be peaceful. Mitsuki nodded. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but it's the truth. Right now, even as we speak, the 5th Great Ninja War is being fought. Those words made Itachi want to vomit. Not only will there be an inevitable 4th war that he killed his own blood to prevent, there'll be an even larger 5th. It's almost like his sacrifice was for nothing. He felt numb, hollow in a way. Shisui put a hand on his shoulder and Itachi didn't need to know why. He knew his friend would sense his feelings and act accordingly. Itachi composed himself quickly. I don't suppose you know how to prevent any of these wars. It would be a great help to us, especially if you could give us some detail. With something of regret on his face, Mitsuki shook his head. I'm sorry, but I won't be able to do that. He said. We can't go around and start messing with time like that. We don't know what could become of messing with something so delicate. But the lives on the line are more impo dash. That's fine. Itachi said, interrupting Shisui. Shisui looked at him like he had a second head. Itachi, this is hundreds of thousands of lives lost that we could save. Even children get dragged into this mess. And we must carry on with the pain and knowledge that it is what must be done to keep this world safe. Itachi finally looked back at his friend. If we go about changing the future, the effects could not only be disastrous but unpredictable as well. We must bear with it. Shisui looked him in the eyes for a couple of more seconds before relenting with a sigh. He gestured for Itachi to continue his conversation with Sarada. Sarada, my nephew, he breathed out. I would like to chat privately with you. He briefly glanced at their surroundings. But I suppose another location would be preferable. She nodded and both her and Mitsuki began to walk towards the stairs just as they felt the chakra of someone else entering the house. Shisui turned to look down the hall and could see a blonde in a cloak rushing them. A pair of arms shot out of the opening in the tile and wrapped around the blonde, trapping him. He struggled a bit against the binds, but when Mitsuki appeared from the hole he stopped, and after that he was let go. Naruto Uzumaki's son, correct? Itachi asked, looking the blonde up and down. He could very easily see the resemblance, but he could also feel just how much power the blonde held looking so young. The thought was frightening for Itachi. That a mere child had to train so hard to kill. The blonde nodded, looking a bit bewildered, but probably figured Sarada and Mitsuki told them about their situation. He also trusted them since he knew about both Uchihas. He held out a hand when Itachi walked up to him. Boruto Uzumaki. Itachi took it with a smile. Itachi Uchiha. Nice to meet you. Come, we have other things to discuss. I have already been told why you guys are here. Boruto nodded and the five of them walked to the living room, unaware of a dark figure slipping through the wall from inside of the secret meeting place. Triple X. Kakashi rushed with his Chidori and Obito leapt back in response. I can't catch him. Kakashi realized, changing tactics. The lightning in his hand formed into a hound and he launched it at Obito once more. Again with this? He asked. He focused his left Mangekyo on the attack and a spiral engulfed it before it could even get close to him. Don't think that's it. Kakashi said, going through multiple hand seals. Wind style, Blade Runner. Sharp spike-like wind rushed at Obito and it would have been almost invisible to the naked eye, but Obito could see its chakra and countered because of it. Earth style, Mud Wall. A wall of earth rose before Obito and the blades of wind sliced through it, but once again they were Kemui'd away. You should realize by now that ninjutsu doesn't work on me, Kakashi. Obito said, still leaping away from the Jounin. Again, Kakashi did more hand seals, going faster and faster. He would make Obito eat his words. Water style, Giant Exploding Ravine. This is getting annoying. Obito muttered, landing on the ground as a giant sea of water exploded out of nowhere and raced at him. He pushed Chakra to his feet and leapt away, watching the water push onto his previous location. Above you. Kakashi announced and Obito shot his head in that direction, barely blocking a kick that shoved into his arm. They separated, landing on the small sea of water that Kakashi had created, using Chakra to stay afloat. You can't win, Kakashi. There's no point in this. Obito said, but suddenly looked down at hands wrapped around his ankles. He was pulled under the water but was able to take a deep breath beforehand. You're making this easy, Kakashi. I can see your chakra more clearly now. Lightning erupted into Kakashi's hand above the water. Underneath him a clone of him and Obito were fighting harshly, going back and forth. Chidori! He bellowed, slamming the technique into the water. Lightning spread fast as the water was a conductor. A clone? Obito thought, surprised and momentarily frozen. His eyes widened when a rush of chakra flooded his vision before he was electrocuted harshly that it forced a yell out of him and he began to inhale the water. Did I get him? Kakashi wondered above the now moving water. He got his answer and leaped away before he got crushed. The hand of Obito's Susanoo pushed out of the water, almost killing him in the process. Kakashi's eyes widened in recognition. That was the same technique he saw Itachi use. What was it though? Was it a family thing? The full-body Susanoo emerged slowly from the water until it was at full height, towering over Kakashi. This is the difference in our power, Kakashi. Give up. Kakashi wasn't going to yield. Obito would have to beat him down to the point he couldn't move for that to happen. No. I'll show you just how much you're underestimating me. Kakashi increased his focus on the attack and leaped away when he was about to be crushed under a foot. It's pretty fast, he thought. What was he going to do about this thing? It was gigantic and most of his techniques had no answer to it. He continued to dodge, finding that while it was fast it was severely slower than Obito himself, but he supposed it made up for it in raw power. Obito stopped trying to hit him and took to the skies. It would be pointless to use large-scale attacks on Kakashi because if he couldn't teleport it away he would die from it, and that wasn't his goal. He needed to be alone, ruling with no feelings for the better world he was trying to create. He couldn't let his emotions get the better of him. But he knew that if he didn't put Kakashi down he would only keep fighting. I got it. Kakashi thought, sliding to a stop and going through hand seals so quick that his hands were blurs. He figured out quickly that he would need time to mold the amount of chakra the technique would take. It would have been easier if he had already had a base like lightning from the sky. Molding it all with chakra alone would take a lot of time. Why is he still trying when he's outmatched? Obito asks himself in disbelief, seeing Kakashi's unwavering will to try and stop him. Why won't he give up? He finds the questions circulating his mind familiar. They were the same question that floated through his mind when he couldn't get Naruto to see that the world would not change. That real peace was an illusion that only the infinite Tsukuyomi could make a reality. But he was the one he could not face reality. A dream would to solve mankind's problems to peace. And even after all this time gaining power, gaining comrades, and gaining a life to call his own, he could not find the one problem that would fix all of his. The true answer to peace. He tried to be happy. He tried to have friends even though he could never erase the guilt of seeing them because he knew he didn't deserve it. He tried to be a good person, saying he was saving the world for everyone's benefits when the entire time he was lying to himself. He wanted redemption. He wanted to be accepted back into society. He wasn't a righteous person. He was selfish. He didn't deserve that and it disgusted him to no end. The only way for him to keep himself sane from all his jumbled thoughts was to remove himself from the leaf. No longer would he be a ninja for them. He needed to be a ninja for the world. He could no longer pretend he was okay when he simply wasn't. He just couldn't. Kakashi just give up. He thinks defeatedly, growing tired of fighting. Let me leave already. Leave me alone. Now, the first part. Kakashi thought, having molded all the hand signs he would need. Earth style, petrification technique. The ground began to mold and travel to the feet of the Susanoo before slithering up both its feet like snakes. As more and more poured on it began to harden to the point where not even steel would penetrate it. He's trapping me? Obito mutters, staring down. Now. Let's finish this. He crouched slightly and charges a lightning blade between both his hand and ran up the Susanoo even faster than lightning could strike the ground. As he ran he struck the Susanoo deeply at multiple points, so fast that Obito couldn't react to it in time. Lightning style, twin lightning shiver. He shot up in the air and lightning struck from the sky into his palm and he dove down, smashing the enhanced lightning blade right into the Susanoo head, almost shattering it. The armor somehow held, but Obito's blank face had not. He was surprised at just how strong Kakashi actually was. To think he'd be able to pierce my perfect Susanoo. Obito's thinking was his undoing as he had not realized Kakashi was still moving. His other palm struck out and chakra swirled in it. Rasengan. His palm slammed into the Susanoo and its head shattered into pieces. The momentum from it carried Kakashi forward and he tackled into Obito and began free falling. Obito was quick to regain his senses but nearly lost them again when a fist smashed into his face. Wake up! Wake the hell up, Obito! Kakashi yelled out, unleashing an onslaught on his teammate right until they smashed into the ground with enough impact to cause trees miles away to collapse. Kakashi found himself gasping for air, trying to find his breath that the impact had took away from him. The dust settled and the shinobi found himself sprawled in the middle of a huge crater large enough to fit a small village in. A couple meters away, he heard a hoarse cough and then a small chuckle. "You saw it, didn't you?" Obito asked. "My memories? I know my chakra got through to you." Kakashi could barely find the words he wanted to say. And even then, they were not nearly enough. "Obito." His voice came out in short bursts between breaths and slimmed into breathless whispers. "You're from the past?" Kakashi saw it. Saw what he did. What his philosophy was made him like that. And what changed him? Why didn't you say anything? The rain began to clear, but the damage to their clothes were long done. Water dripped down his head, forcing him to close his eyes, and he let his eyes relax. There was no point in hiding it anymore. "How would I tell you, Kakashi? You had proof. I would have believed you, Obito. Just like I believe in you to save the world from Kaguya and her clan." Obito's mouth parted briefly. He wanted to say something, anything. But the words would not only come out, they wouldn't even form in his head. He couldn't think. He stopped trying to speak after that, and settled with a heartwarming smile. "I'll help you, Obito." Kakashi glanced over at him. "But stop thinking you don't deserve a happy life because of what you did in the past. Let go of it. Don't burden your happiness on something that hasn't happened anymore." "Heh, funny you say that, Kakashi. Isn't your dad the reason you don't want to get with Rin?" Kakashi sighed. "At first it was. I didn't want to make connections with anyone, especially someone that could become a lover, and I'd end up as alone as I felt when my father died if she ended up dead. The older and mature I got, the more I realized that I was only thinking about if when I could just be preventing myself from being happy. At one point, I was close to asking her out, but then I remembered you." A surprised breath escaped Obito's mouth. He didn't expect to hear he was the reason. "You loved her," he continued. "I couldn't picture myself taking her away from you when I knew how you would feel on the inside. You would never show it. What about when I got married? You could have asked her then." "I could have," he agreed in a grunt. "But I knew that if you had the choice back, then you would have chosen Rin over Yukaina." Then what do you think I would do now?" Kakashi answered without hesitation. "You would choose your wife over anyone." Obito was shocked but broke out laughing, unable to stop himself. He slowly pushed himself to his feet as Kakashi soon followed suit. They stared at each other even as they both stood up on their feet, clear exhaustion on their body, but they were no longer about to fight. "Obito, trust in your comrades." Kakashi held out a hand. "Let all of us help you change the future. XXX." Sasuke was finally free from the final valley. It was long in the distance by now. But he stops running after a couple of minutes of doing so. It wasn't because he was tired, but he didn't know where he was supposed to be going. He didn't have a guide nor instructions on where he could find Orochimaru, and he had a gut feeling that something was about to happen, but he couldn't place it for the life of him. Well, until it landed right in front of him. He narrows his eyes curiously, wondering how she kept track of him and why she decided to show herself. It was Hinata, shaking slightly as the anxiety went through the roof as soon as she landed. She didn't even know how she was able to work up the courage to even follow him, much less actually land before him. Sasuke glares at her eyes in anger. "So, you followed me with those pesky eyes of your, huh? You did for nothing. I already beat Naruto. There's no point in someone as weak as you trying to fight me." Hinata feels her heart begin to beat rapidly, gaining speed by the second, and at the moment it's clouding her mind and freezing her body. TCH, Sasuke was seeing the whole thing, beginning to feel sorry that someone from a prominent clan just like his would freeze up before he barely even said anything. What a waste of time. He begins to walk toward her, aiming to go past her with no contest, but snarls angrily when she moves in front of him. I can't let you go. And Naruto P promised Sakura T that he would bring you back. She squeaks quietly, trying desperately to calm her quickened heartbeat and desperate puffs of air. I've already defeated that loser. What challenge can you offer to me when you can't even tell the loser you love him? Her face turned red at the mention of that fact. She swallows it in, shaking as she responds. And Naruto is not a loser. Sasuke only stares at her, flipping his Sharingan on her. His potent chakra scares her, it's more than she thought he would have. How could she beat that? She couldn't beat her cousin, even when he was holding back on her tremendously. Even with the strength Naruto's encouraging words provided, she was still weak and she felt like that fact couldn't change no matter what she did. A deep despair settled in her stomach and her throat tightened, she couldn't swallow. She was going to give up. To let Sasuke leave, despite what Naruto wanted. Words flash into her head, Naruto's words. I'll become Hokage at all cost. No one's destiny is set in stone. Anyone can change their position with enough effort. They say I was a failure. And I'll prove them wrong. You can do it, Hinata. You're stronger than you think. Her eyes widens into saucers and Sasuke was just about to pass her when she struck out with a palm, surprising Sasuke, who didn't think she would move against him. Spittle escapes his gaping mouth as he slams into the ground harshly. Hinata holds her stance, surprised that she actually hit Sasuke. That she actually moved. That it actually worked. She was breathing hard, all her anxiety being released in that one moment, and she found that, just as when she fought Neji, she could think clearly. Doubts no longer clouded her thoughts and actions. Sasuke stands to his feet slowly, and despite being hurt by the surprise attack he smirks and wipes the spit off his mouth. His Sharingan blazes in excitement. He always wanted to fight the Byakugan, and while that had mostly been because of Neji, he supposed Hinata would do. Hinata, that had been the first time he called her by name. I'll acknowledge your willpower. He said, knowing that she would never normally even talk to him out of fright. But you'll need more than that to stop me. Hinata was prepared to do anything. If it meant that Naruto would get what he wanted, then she would do anything. She takes her family's traditional stance silently and Sasuke takes his own. A breeze runs through the area and rustles the leaves. One moment the two shinobi are staring at each other in concentration. The next, they clashed. Hinata could feel that something was different in the way she fought. Her thoughts were clear and she could tell that her eyes were growing stronger somehow. Her body was as well and she was beginning to move faster than even she knew. She was going that fast. She needed it. Sasuke's strikes were hard and unrelenting and she very easily found herself on the back foot from his fist alone, his experience in more battles and being a genius easily overwhelming her. Sasuke was not happy though. He should have been knocked her out, but she was actually fighting. Naruto's determined face flashes through his mind and he now knows where all this strength is coming from. He knew of her crush. That meant she was getting strength from that moron somehow. He throws a wild punch and Hinata ducks underneath before leaping up both her feet and smashing two palms into his stomach and he stumbled in pain but only for a second. He ignores the flaring pain and rushes forward, taking her by surprise by smashing into her body with his own. She skids along the ground, wincing as Sasuke leaps into the air and preforms numerous hand seals. Fire style, Fire Phoenix Jutsu. He yells, multiple small fireballs escaping him and rushing at Hinata. Her eyes widens at it, she was surprised, but she didn't freeze like normally. She moved. She turned and ran, dodging the flurry of attacks that scorched the ground and heated the air. Finally the barrage stopped and she turned to try and find Sasuke with her supervision. That was a mistake. Sasuke zipped around her and by the time she knew it he was behind her aiming a kick. She saw it in time with her Byakugan and she was only able to turn in time and block before being launched away by Sasuke. Fire style, Fireball Jutsu. She hears Sasuke call afterward and even through her closed eyelids she can see the large fireball rushing at her, torching the ground violently. Her eyes snap open and she can feel chakra pouring from every pore in her body. She closes her eyes and takes a breath before spinning, faster than she ever had before. Rotation. A whirlwind of chakra pours out of her and completely outmatched Sasuke's fireball, dissipating it completely. Nothing was left but the scorched ground. Sasuke was visibly confused and shocked. What? When could she dash? I was able to do it. She thinks, internally celebrating in her head. Her Byakugan had basically copied how Neji had done it from seeing him do it, and just like the Sharingan user, she capitalized on it. Surprisingly, it wasn't the only thing she saw with her eyes. She ran almost as fast as Sasuke had moments prior and zigzagged around him until she decided to attack from behind. Sasuke saw the familiar move she was using. I didn't know the Byakugan could copy techniques just like the Sharingan could. But it makes sense. Their eyes, that can see the chakra pathway system, should be able to copy any technique one used with chakra. Just like the Sharingan can. Sasuke smirks. But it won't work on me. My Sharingan will see through it. He turned swiftly, diverting a swift palm that was fast enough that it kicked up dirt. His Sharingan blazed as she tried to strike him several more times, but they all failed. Suddenly, he cuts through her offensive and delivers a headbutt that catches her off guard and sends her reeling back. He ducks low quickly and brings his foot up. He kicks her in the chin and she shoots into the air in pain. He follows her up, flying in the air behind her. Before he can follow up with one of his signature techniques, Hinata releases chakra from all the pores on her back, pushing Sasuke off her. Spittle shoots out of his mouth and is crashed harshly onto the ground, tons of dust shooting in the air. Hinata lands on the ground a fair distance away from him, able to see through the dust easily, but it wouldn't be an advantage for long. It was already clearing up. She got low into a stance and held it, waiting for the dust to clear just a bit more. Finally, it was almost gone. Damn it! Sasuke thought, trying to keep himself from biting his lip in anger. His body felt weak and suddenly felt a lack of chakra, and it was hard to move. It was like something was cutting off his power. His mind went back to Hinata's earlier attack and he knew why. How was she able to hit my chakra points turned around? I made sure not to get touched by her hands. TCH, what a waste of effort. I didn't want to use this too. Damn. Hinata was calm. She had seen the fight between Naruto and Sasuke. She knew how much he did to get him back and knew why he felt the need to leave. That man, his older cousin, and the rest of his family killed the Uchiha clan entirely. They had lied to everyone, but the worst of it was that they lied to Sasuke himself. Even when they knew he was searching for the killer, trying to find clues only for it to be a fabrication. He had good reason to leave. But she wouldn't let him. The path he was planning to take, even if justified, wasn't the right decision. Even if he disowned his family, she was pretty sure he still had Naruto and Sakura by his side. He didn't need to leave. He only needed closure. She circulated chakra across her body and slid her feet into a stance, letting her body relax as she raised her arms to her sides. Sasuke chuckles, momentarily ruining her concentration. Her eyes widened when his chakra fluctuated wildly and seals began spreading across his face. I didn't want to use this on you, but you forced my hand. Just like when Naruto did against Nissan. She realized. He used chakra to bypass her hitting his chakra point. She would have to hit him to the point where his body wouldn't be able to move. Sasuke crouched, opening his hand after performing seals. Chidori. Lightning sparks violently in his hand and Hinata sees the potency in it. It would kill her if she wasn't careful. Don't think for a second that you can actually beat me. You can't even talk to Naruto properly. Don't get ahead of yourself. Hinata takes another breath, finally steeling herself and assuring herself that she could deflect it. She would have to use the rest of her chakra though. She had enough chakra to fight afterward, but it was not enough for even the 32 palms technique, and while she could see him coming, her body was nowhere near fast enough to react to him. Only rotation would do. Chakra began pouring out of her and Sasuke rushed forward, his attack cutting the ground beneath him. The locked eyes. Rotation. Chidori. Before their attacks could collide, fire cut through the middle and exploded, pushing both of them away from one another several meters. Dust flies into the air and slowly gets picked up by the soft breeze. Sasuke grunts, picking himself up to his feet and locking his eyes on the figure that was in the dust, and his eyes widened in shock. He could see whose chakra it was. Izumi. His heart began to pick up considerably and he could now see her in full lighting without the smoke covering. Eye to eye, they stared. Sharingan to Sharingan. Sasuke she tried. Shut up! He yells out in a rage, cutting her off. He stumbles back a little. I don't want to hear any more of your lies. Her face contorts in confusion. Sasuke, what are you talking about? Sasuke cackles madly, unable to stop himself. Just how long were they going to keep this from him? They all were a bunch of murderers. You thought I wouldn't figure out that my own family is responsible for our clan's annihilation? Her eyes widen in surprise and her body freezes up. Sasuke Don't! He interrupted once more. Save yourself the trouble. I won't listen to a murder, so get out of my way. Her lips set a thin line. I can't let you leave, Sasuke. Sasuke gritted his teeth, struggling internally on whether he wanted to fight her or not. You won't let me leave, but you were fine with letting the rest of our family leave this earth, right? He began stalking toward her, every word escaping his mouth felt like punches to her. You killed our entire family and now you want to pretend you care about me. You were planning to kill me too, weren't you? Izumi's patience could not hold. No. Sasuke, we did it to protect you. You weren't safe. And I'm safe now? If you haven't noticed, I'm a target because you guys are too strong, so they'll come after me to get the Sharingan. They wouldn't do that if our entire family was here. You aren't protecting me. Obito isn't even around. But the rest of us are. She bellowed over the raging water and crackling thunder. We've been taking care of you ever since that day. How can you say that we haven't protected you? Sasuke didn't utter a word, letting actions speak for him. He released the power of Orochimaru's curse mark, advancing it to stage 2. She stared wide-eyed at the physical and internal change. If you truly were protecting me, this wouldn't even be a thing. Don't! Izumi uttered, lowering her head as shadows covered her eyes. That was due to another person's actions. Don't blame that on us. And even if it were our fault, why would you go to someone that put you in danger? For power. The words were simple, but it struck Izumi deep. Those were the same words that started the entire Uchiha massacre. The Uchiha wanted power. Authority. Maybe they deserved it, but starting a war over that was the reason they had to be eliminated. And now, the one she viewed as her little brother was following in that path. Sasuke, her voice broke and her body shook. Don't ever say those words again. Power is not for one to possess for self-gain but to preserve and help the lives of others. Is that what you did? Sasuke questioned quickly after she spoke. Did you preserve the life of our family? It was a mission, Sasuke. She admitted loudly, silencing the teen as she fell to her knees. The mud from the rain sinking into her clothing. The leaf assigned us the mission. We could have refused, but then you wouldn't have been here, Sasuke. Why don't you understand that? Sasuke let out a breath, letting his curse mark recede back into his neck. I've heard enough. I'm leaving. But know this, he stared deeply into her eyes. I will be getting revenge for my clan. Hot tears began falling down her cheeks and she reached out to him desperately. Sasuke dash. I'm sorry, Izumi. Kabuto landed beside Sasuke with a smirk. But there's nothing that will change his mind. Fighting either him or I won't mean a thing if his mind is made up. You know that, don't you? Sasuke looked away from her. Just take me to Orochimaru. I can't stand looking at her any longer. Kabuto smirked, placing a hand on his shoulder. As you wish. They dispersed, leaving the clearing with a grieving Izumi and a downed Hinata. Chapter 54. Rin found herself barely able to move forward. She felt both of their chakras raging in a battle so personal that she could practically feel their emotions through the air. She had no idea either of them was just this strong. And she always prided herself on her ability to sense chakra, but she didn't sense this. I guess I didn't know them like I thought I did. That thought out her in so much despair and shame that she tried rubbing her head to alleviate from such thoughts. She didn't want to believe that all they had been through as teammates was for nothing. There has to be some type of explanation. Something to explain all of this. She didn't know what that was. All she did know was that she needed to see her teammates. She needed to see what had happened. What was the result of their battle? Please, she mentally prayed as she was about to see them. Please don't let anyone have died. I don't know if I'll be able to handle any of that. She stumbled past a cluster of bushes, and when she lifted her head, the sight before her caused her to begin to cry. The two men were sitting up against a tree, talking and laughing as if they hadn't even been fighting in the first place. The only things giving it away were the battlefield, the clothes and injuries, and the fact that she had felt that they had been fighting prior to this. Rin. Kakashi had been the first to notice her as she fell to her knees, desperately covering her face to keep the tears from showing. She wept as Obito and Kakashi shared a look before getting to their feet and sitting down beside their teammate. They both hugged her. You damn idiots," she said in between tears. Why do you always have to fight? We're sorry, Rin. Kakashi tried, but the tears had kept falling. It was silent after that. The only noise filling the clearing was her crying and the hard rain pelting the ground beneath them. She wiped her face to try and stop the hot tears falling down her cheeks. Just seeing them all beat up from each other just made her cry for some reason. She just didn't like seeing it. She sniffles and wipes her eye one last time. As they release her, she smiles sadly. Sorry guys. I'm kinda embarrassed now. She chuckles a bit at the last part. Kakashi's next move had both shocked and startled not only her but Obito as well. He softly grabbed her face and pulled down his mask to kiss her. A pant went through Obito's chest when he saw it, but he found he was smiling somehow. He felt that pain, that sudden emptiness at the kiss, but he also felt happy. Why? Why did he feel this way? He gripped his chest where his heart was, trying to understand the feelings going through him at the moment, but he understood nothing. Then, suddenly, a picture of his wife came into his mind and his heart began to calm. It was like that hole in his heart was finally filling away. Tears began to fall from his eyes, blurring his vision. Tenderly but suddenly, he grabbed his teammates into a hug, inadvertently stopping their kiss, but that didn't matter to them at the moment. The both grabbed onto Obito and one another for a Team Minato group hug. Behind them, a phantom of their sensei smiled all before fading away. Triple X. Itachi walked into his room, guiding his niece and gesturing her to sit beside him on the bed after he took a seat. She did silently, unable to look at him the entire time. Of course Itachi noticed it and decided to let her be for a small while so she would calm down. He could sense her increased heartbeat. Sarada, Itachi started soft but intently. I can see that you can barely look at me. And when you do, you have that sad look passing your face. Itachi turned to her. Did I die in front of you? She didn't flinch like he expected. Her face clenched and her body began shaking softly, almost like she was cold. But he knew it wasn't that, and took her silence as affirmation. Have you been told the past of our clan, Sarada? A little. She uttered in a small voice. Itachi nodded softly. Our clan has made mistakes. Filled by hatred with a thirst for power will only bring a Uchiha loneliest and despair. Every Uchiha, even myself, has felt the temptation of power, to have so much of it at just the tips of your fingers that you could practically feel it. But after all that power, what else would you have? He turned to his niece, slowly bringing her in for a hug. She began crying. Her thoughts were everywhere, and she could still see just how he died and just how her father died so vividly. How the village was destroyed. And every single time she would be present but unable to change the outcome. Shivers crawled throughout her body. She dreamed of being Hokage when she was so young, which felt like such a long time ago. But even now, she didn't know what it meant to be Hokage. What it meant protecting her village. What it meant to confront hatred. Don't let your hatred isolate you, Sarada. Or you'll be no better than the enemies you need to beat. He gently grabbed her face and turned it so that she could look him in the face. Choose your own path, Sarada. I wish I could choose it for you, but I cannot come with you. He smiled. I have a duty to make sure you come to pass. Understand? She wiped away her tears and nodded. Yes, understood. Sorry to interrupt. Mitsuki said, surprising even Itachi as he hadn't felt the boy in the room. When did you dash? I'd been here ever since you hugged once another. He smiled lightly. It's such a serene scene. Is something going on? Itachi asked, getting to his feet. Mitsuki shook his head. No. But... He pulled out a turtle sculpture, and before Itachi could question what it was, it opened up and colorful chakra filled the room. Our way back home is ready. Itachi turned back to Sarada. Are you prepared to face the hatred the future will bring? She closed her eyes, remaining silent for several seconds. She opened them, despite tears beginning to fall. Her eyes shined in determination and she nodded. I am. Itachi couldn't help but smile, tapping her on the forehead with affection. Keep your head on straight, Sarada. I'll always be with you. A single tear befell her cheek and he wiped it away. Mitsuki smiled to himself. Maybe this would fix the darkness that dwelled in her heart. Only time would tell. Boruto walked into the room, noticing how bright the room was, and Shisui was close behind him. What's going on? Shisui asked, staring at the lights around the room in curiosity. Boruto smiled softly. Don't worry, Shisui-san. That's just our way home. It's time for us to get out of here. Oh, Shisui raised an eyebrow and walked up to Boruto, smirking a bit. Despite his injuries, he was still very fast, and as quick as lightning he struck out with a fist, even adding a bit of his chakra to it. His widened. Oh, you're good. I think you're ready. Boruto had been able to catch his fist just a fraction away from his face. Boruto smirked his own self, but his was a bit different. It held a small sadness. Thank you, Shisui-san. I won't let you down. Shisui smiled as Boruto let go of his fist. I know you won't. Give the bad guys a hell of a blow for me. Boruto nodded. Of course. In fact, he would do much more than that. The turtle-looking device began producing wind and the room began to shake slightly. The lights that had been circulating the room became even brighter and even faster as they swerved around the room rapidly. Itachi looked mildly concerned. Are we going to need to step out? I wouldn't want one of us to get caught by it by accident and sent to the future. No, that won't be necessary. Mitsuki said, holding out the object so that he could get a better look. It should recognize our chakra to the original timeline and send us back. You didn't come with us, so you won't be included. Itachi nodded, relieved. He looked on in silence as the three shinobi stood side by side. They all looked so prepared to fight now. So prepared to fight the ugly future. That had even killed him. Itachi was at peace though, despite knowing of his demise. The thought didn't scare him. It was almost like he accepted it as something that needed to happen. That needed to happen for the entire world to be safe. He had so much more he wanted to say. Not just to Sarada, but to all of them. But in a sudden and quick flash of bright white light, the three future shinobi disappeared from their house, from their world. No longer could he feel their chakra. They were truly gone. Hey, Itachi. Shursui spoke, still staring at the spot the future teens had been standing in before that bright flash of light. Yes? Shursui finally turned to him with a bright smile stretched across his face. Let's put our hope in the future. Those simple words had caused something in Itachi to be put to rest. Maybe it was the knowledge of his death. Maybe it was the uncertainty of the future. Or maybe even it was the darkness he felt still blundering his niece from the full picture of what she needed to do in order to save the world. He didn't entirely know, but did that really matter? It probably didn't if he couldn't place a direct finger on it anyway. Itachi couldn't help the smile that graced his lips and barely held in a laugh. He looked back at where the teens had disappeared. Yes, you're right. My hope goes out to the future. Triple X. It had been a few days since Sasuke became a missing ninja, and it was finally time to come before the council and the daimyo's council for the remaining Uchiha in the village. Obito had not been looking forward to the entire thing and was sure the same was true for his fellow clan members, as they all weren't in the best of moves. Obito led them all to the council room and found that they were now standing before all the major clan leaders of the village, the Hokage, and the elders. Obito skimmed the group of individuals before his eyes landed on the Hokage. He gives her a nod. Hokage-sama. I hope this day treats you well. She nods back at him. Thank you, Obito. For you as well. She locks her fingers before her, unaware of the slight looks the elders sent her way. As usual, they were disapproving. But now it is time to get down to business. I presume you all know why you are here. They all nodded at once. Obito couldn't help but frown at the looks the others had on their faces. From their understanding, Sasuke had simply defeated Naruto and gotten away from Izumi with Kabuto's help. But the reality was that Obito was the catalyst of that, and even worse, Sasuke's vengeance is likely higher than it had ever been previously. And once more, it was Obito's fault. I'd like to start off this meeting right. Tsunade continued. So I'll cut to the chase. Tsunade stared solely at him. Obito, unofficially, you are the leader of the Uchiha clan, correct? He nodded. Yes, for now. Itachi will be officially taking over the mantle soon, however. She nodded as well. That's to be expected. He was the first heir after all. Well, now he was the only heir. The new daimyo will be named in a couple of days in the capital of the Land of Fire. He'll have a say in whether the Uchiha clan will be allowed to be a part of Konoha's government. What? Shursui yelled out. You're going to take power away from us because Sasuke left? We can still get him back. Koharu frowned deeply. Please refrain from such outbursts. Shursui looked to be about to protest before Obito rose his hand, effectively silencing the speedster of the Uchiha clan. Obito was going to speak but was surprised to see his wife raise her hand to speak. Tsunade nodded in a show of permission and she was given the floor to speak. As usual, her voice was mellow and polite. If you do not mind me asking, when you say that it is up in the air for our clan to be a part of Konoha's government, what exactly do you mean? Obito didn't miss when she said our clan. What I mean is that they won't have their current position of power that they do now. Tsunade answered. I was told that you do the paperwork for your husband when he is out of the village. Is that correct? She nodded gracefully. Yes, Lady Hokage. Tsunade continued. If you remember, some of that work is opinions the clans are given in which the village can be run effectively and fairly. It can also make requests and such for better equipment and more land and etc. But most importantly, it gives permission to the clans as well as special privileges. Yukina took in the information in complete silence, and waited for her superior to stop talking completely before she spoke. Are those privileges the ones you have to take from us? She nodded. Correct. Obito wanted some way to take out his frustration. His decision was now having disastrous repercussions and there wasn't much he could do to stop it. But, was there a way to stop it? He didn't have much political sway as he should have, that was his own fault, but he had powerful connections. Connections he could use to his advantage. He growled internally. Would he seriously have to go to his wife's father? Lady Hokage, if I may? Itachi asked, being the first full-blooded Uchiha to speak besides Obito. Shisui had been yelling so he didn't count. If couldn't help but notice you said the new daimyo would be the one to make the ultimate decision on the matter. If so, how come you called this meeting? If they weren't the ones making the decision, why would this meeting be called in the first place? It's simple. Koharu answered before Tsunade had a chance to let a sound out of her open mouth. The Hokage and Council's opinion can influence the decision since the daimyo will be new to his position. Tsunade's mouth closed with an audible click of annoyance at being so blatantly interrupted. Yes, that's correct. However, I will have to place limitations on your clan if I were to help in your favor. Excuse me, Lady Hokage. A deep stern voice interjected. Turns out it had been the Hyuga clan leader Hayashi who had spoken. I hope that doesn't mean you will be attempting to help them without giving the rest of our opinions actual consideration. He said with crossed arms. Don't be ridiculous. Shikaku told him from across the room and stared unblinkingly when his piercing gaze settled on him. Our opinions should be to help them keep their positions. They are comrades of the Leaf. What rubbish! Hayashi blurted, angrily. A member of their clan just deserted the Leaf. Don't tell me that another member won't just do the same thing. You must have forgotten how far their loyalties lie. Sung said in defense of the Uchiha. They were the ones to slaughter their own clan to keep peace in the damn village. Their loyalty shouldn't be questioned. While she normally kept out of matter that involved others because she never cared about things like that, this situation was entirely different. As the leader of a pack, loyalty meant everything to her, as well as the Inuzuka as a whole. Oh, yes. Hayashi said, certainly remembering the event as if it had happened yesterday. But do not forget. That order was from a traitor of the Leaf Danzo. There's reason to believe that they could have been involved with each other before then. Hey, Hayashi. Obito called out, gaining the attention of the room. The Uchiha's loyalty to the village is second to none. For the sake of peace within, we would do anything. Hayashi narrowed his eyes and lifted his chin, as if to signal superiority. Really then? Then you wouldn't mind marking Sasuke as a B-rank threat in the bingo book, would you? Izumi gasped and the other Uchiha couldn't hold their surprise at such a remark by the Hyuga leader. Even Itachi and Obito, who were usually expressionless, expressed surprise at even the notion. That's unnecessary. Choza declared with a frown. He shouldn't be penalized for leaving the village. He's a child. He doesn't yet know of the repercussions. Hayashi turned to him with a cold glare. What is the reason for the likes of you defending the likes of him? Itachi glared at the Hyuga leader but chose not to spoke. He is the reason our children are injured and that the sand had to come in last minute to help them turn the tide in battle. If another country were to catch wind of this, what's to say they won't attack us? Okay, that's a stretch. Izumi finally spoke out, tired of hearing this nonsense. She was already reeling emotionally from having Sasuke know about that dark secret. The sand seems to be aligned with us. They won't attack unless they want war. Hayashi let out a rare sound of bafflement. You think the sand will help us in our time of need just because they've done it once? They don't even have a Kazekage leading them anymore. They'd rather focus on building their military than helping us, girl. Izumi growled in anger. She wasn't the only one mad, however. That comment pushed the hot-headed Sum's buttons as well. Hey, pale face. What was that girl comment all about? One could practically see her fangs. There's no need to get angry, everyone. Inoichi said softly, trying to placate the tension. He was still recovering from the explosion that had blown up the interrogation headquarters. He couldn't speak above a normal tone. Screw that. I want to see what that was all about. Don't you dare bare your fangs at me, women. That's enough. Tsunade yelled, standing up swiftly and smashing her fist on the desktop. We will have no squabbling in the middle of an important meeting like this. Hayashi scoffed quietly and looked away while Tsum growled but said nothing. After that it was silent for a couple of moments before a low voice spoke up. Lady Hokage, if I may. Shibi Aburame said, head of his insect-using clan. My opinion on the matter is currently that the Uchiha may have shown loyalty in the past, but they have also shown disloyalty. Meaning that regardless of choice, each would be fair and unfair to them. I propose we try and meet in the middle. That way each clan could be happy. Tsunade seemed to like the idea. Okay, that sounds good. Do you have anything in mind, Shibi-san? If it is okay with you, I would like to wait until the others have named their own conditions. Tsunade agreed to that with a nod of the head. Wait. Shursui called out, gaining the attention of the room. Before you make your decisions, I have a question. What if we were to recapture Sasuke and bring him back here? Then he would have to be placed in prison for his transgressions against the leaf. Hamura said, finally speaking amongst the big group. What? Shursui blurted. But he only deserted the village. Isn't that only cause for an evaluation and constant supervision? It's not that simple. Tsunade said, closing her eyes and trying not to sigh. He injured and almost got several children killed on their mission to get him. The last Uzumakian child of Lord 4th Naruto, the Hyuga head Hinata, the Inuzuka head Kiba, the Nara head Shikamaru, and the surrounding forest destroyed in battle. Things like those cannot be easily forgiven. But we have a prisoner from them. Shursui argued. We can find Sasuke and likely even more about Orochimaru from studying her. That's impossible, I'm afraid. Jiraiya said, being the last person in the room to speak. Orochimaru has some type of secret seal inside the curse mark. If I try to get anything out of it, it'll activate. I don't know what it does, but I'm not willing to test it out. Then back to my point. Hayashi said, bringing focus back to him. I've already said my opinion, but since I have no other choice, I simply want their position back to the way it was after the Kyuubi attack. You'd risk another attempt of a coup like that? Izumi blurted out, and Obito wished so badly she hadn't said that. You idiot! He thought. A lot of faces in the room had bared on Izumi. Is that a threat? Are you insinuating that you will have a coup because of this? Hayashi said. You know she didn't mean it like that. Shikaku tried. You don't know that. Hayashi whirled on him. Stop defending these criminals. You say we are criminals. Itachi began. His voice powerful despite his low tone, and it carried over the room. But we were the ones who both stopped the Akatsuki and Danzo. Without us that wouldn't have been possible. None of you were in the village. Hayashi began to chuckle, as if what Itachi said was funny. You say that, and while it's true that you defended the village, do not forget that it is your clan's fault that we were out of the village in the first place. If we were Danzo wouldn't have gotten so deep in and destroy so much. Oh, Tsu muttered reluctantly, her anger calming down enough for her to think. He's right. Orochimaru came and attacked Konoha to get the Sharingan, so we were forced to take extra missions. Also, Inoichi added. Not that I want to blame you guys, but if Lord Third had not died from sealing Orochimaru's arm, Danzo would have never even attempted something like this. Shikaku didn't want to admit it, but all of that was true. Because of the Uchiha, the leaf was put in constant danger, and even if they protected it, they still were the reasons events like those were capable of happening. Yakaina raised her hand elegantly. If I may? She asked the Hokage and received a quick nod of affirmation. Everything you have said about our clan is true, but you all fail to realize one thing. My husband was one of the candidates to become the Hokage, said by Lord Third himself. If he did not believe us to be trustworthy, do you not think he would do something like this? Obito looked at her, surprised at her solid argument. It had been many times after his sensei's death when he was asked by the old man to begin training for the position. He had always declined. Maybe some part of him wanted that seat, but, truthfully, he didn't trust himself with that much power. For once, Hayashi had no retort to that fact. He couldn't refute it. Everyone in the room was already privy to that tidbit of information, but deep down he did growl in anger. The Uchiha were like insects. They were no good to the safety of the village. Of course we trust Lord Third's thinking. Koharu says truthfully. She always trusted her teammate's opinion in such high regard. She would never say his opinion on someone was incorrect. Then put your trust in me. Obito suddenly says. As the unofficial leader of the Uchiha clan, I can promise you that something like this will not happen again. He turns his attention specifically on Hayashi. But I do understand and accept the problems that the Uchiha have caused in the village and take full responsibility for them. Before anyone can say anything, the Hyuga leader questions him. How do you plan to do that? To take responsibility for your clan's failures? I plan to. The room became deadly silent, almost as if everyone were hanging on his next words. Like they would become the decision that would make or break the clan as a whole. Become Lady Hokage's shadow. Everyone sent him questioning looks, but Obito expected no one to know what exactly that meant. It wasn't like it was an official position. What do you mean by that? Tsunade asked. Your shadow, Lady Hokage. While you protect and serve the village from the inside while the world is watching you, I'll be your shadow. I'll be the one to protect the village from the outside, from the shadows. I'll report only to you. And I also protect you from any danger. I'll be your spy. Whatever you need me to be, for the sake of the village. Obito explained as best he could. Every participant in the room looked stunned, but he didn't mind that. To keep the peace for his clan, and in the village, this was the price that needed to be paid. I accept. Tsunade said. Quickly the room turned to surprised gasped and astonished faces. I saw something interesting when I was looking through files. You were doing something similar with Lord Third, right? Obito nodded. Yes, that's right. I helped out Lord Third on numerous occasions after Lord Fourth died. I believe it's the primary reason I was chosen personally as his successor after my sensei passed. Then that settles it. Tsunade announces to the entire room. I will refer to the new daimyo with this in mind. Meeting adjourned. XXX. In a deep, dark cave, several S-class shinobi sat around a warm fire. Hiding from watchful eyes under the starry sky. A set of footsteps walked inside of it, and when they spoke the voice echoed loudly, even though his voice wasn't particularly high. No one is in sight for miles. I thoroughly checked. He took a seat on the ground, the warmth of the fire a relief to the cold shinobi. Good job, Deidara. We will move in the morning with that in mind. A deep voice spoke back. Of course, leader. Deidara stared blankly at the fire, letting it warm him up, and he sighed softly in relief. He had just come back from scouting out the area they were in. They were in between traveling to their new hideout and as such had to wait in places no one would see them. He went out 5 miles in each direction and hadn't found any living being with the exception of animals. No shinobi, not even civilian in sight. Are you sure we should trust someone as flimsy as Deidara and his art? Once he heard that, the clay user could not control his rage and he whirled on the person who dared say that about his art. What was that about flimsy art, Kakazu? You should watch your mouth before I blow it off. Kakazu barely reacted to one he considered a manchild. But he was no doubt annoyed at the threat. I wish you would gain the confidence to try. Black tendrils escaped his arm, wiggling back and forth disturbingly. I've killed people for far less. Oh, Kisame mutters in amusement. This is a fight I could pay to see. Kakazu had heard him and stopped his intimidation briefly to look back at the sword user. Pay, you say? Enough of this already. You guys will only annoy everyone. Sasori says, leaning against the wall and trying to get comfortable. It was his real body since he had yet to fix his puppet that was destroyed. He for one didn't want to be annoyed at the moment. He still couldn't forget about Shursui and what he did. That battle played in his head over and over. Shut up, puppet man. Haydn smirked, walking in between the two members. He swung his sides down and it carved into the ground. This'll be fun. I'll even join. You'd be the first one to lose though. Weakling. Sasori says while smirking. The infuriated look that took over Haydn's face only caused it to widen. He grabbed his scythe from the ground and launched at Sasori. Don't fuck with me. Sasori held up an arm, aiming to grab the weapon out of the air before something came in between it. It wasn't an object. It was like a force, an invisible force. It pushed back the scythe away, but it was so strong that it blew the other members away as well. Dust and debris flew out the cave entrance and the cave shook violently briefly. Soon it was quiet once more and the dust slowly began to dissipate. It was dark now. The force and wind wiping out the fire. Pakura, if you will. A voice said. A flick of a hand brought out several orbs of intensely hot fire that was contained so that it would only burn if touched. It lit up the cave once more and the leader of the Akatsuki saw that all of the members had made it to their feet. Pain-sama. Juzo says. What was all that about? He had been hit by something powerful and he hadn't even been a part of. The leader of the Akatsuki dropped his hand that had been responsible for pushing them back. There will be no fights between members. He turned away, walking in between Konan and Pakura. Get some rest. And be quiet. Hey, Nagato. Konan says quietly after catching up to him. They walked to the deepest part of the cave. Not now, Konan. He stops, that single footsteps echoing through the cave. He's here. Who? She thinks, a small nervousness settling in her stomach. Good job, Nagato. Keep this up and our plan might just come to fruition. A dark shadow slowly stepped into the dim light until a dark figure shrouded in a cloak appeared from the shadows behind him. A black Zetsu followed, grinning. Madara, Pain regarded respectfully. You grace us with your presence. Madara nods at this before holding out several vials of a liquid. Pain gives them a curious look as well as Konan. This is the DNA of the clan you hail from, Nagato. The Uzumaki. You got that from my deceased clan members, correct? Why are you giving it to me? It would be no point in giving it to you, but that is not the same for the others. With this, their powers will be boosted dramatically. This will enable our plan to be completed even faster. And we'll lose less members this way. Madara explained, handing him the vials. The Uzumaki had strong chakra, strong blood, and an increased life force. It would make the others stronger. Behind them the grinning Zetsu began cackling. And, Madara continued. Introduce our newest member to the others. Pain's brow furrowed. Newest member? Yes. From the shadows, that voice spoke. It wasn't long before Pain sensed her and stared into the darkness. Slowly, to his showing surprise, a teen stepped out of the shadows. This is... The teen opened his eyes, and Pain felt the power coming off him in waves. He was strong, very strong. Kimimaro. Triple X. Sounds like an adventure. No doubt. Asuma commented lightly, wanting to make his student feel better despite knowing the sadness latched inside him. Yeah. Shikamaru had just explained the failure of the mission that was to get Sasuke back. Even then he had gotten a bunch of his teammates hurt in the process. Images of them wouldn't escape his mind. Sakura, Ino, Shino, Kiba, Tenten, Hinata, Niji, and even Naruto had all been hurt in some way because he couldn't lead them. They had failed in recapturing Sasuke and bringing him back, and Rin had practically escaped herself. He didn't accomplish anything as the leader. I'm sure your father talked to you, right? Shikamaru barely raises his head to nod. While his father put hope in him, he couldn't help but think about it. I'm sure he said something you very mature. But I feel the same way. Shikamaru, surprised, turned to his sensei, seeing a sad look come across his face. I was here in the hospital and couldn't help nature my students. I couldn't lead you to succeed, Shikamaru. How do you think, as you sensei, that makes me feel? Probably like how I feel right now. He answered after a moment's pause. It seemed like he didn't want to say it. Asuma nods to him, but soon that sad look turns into a shining look of pride. But I'm proud of you, Shikamaru. A surprised sound escapes his mouth. You did so well. Shikamaru lowers his head, his face squeezing tightly to try and keep the tears in that wouldn't stop. Asuma smiled, lightly ruffling his hair. In another, larger room of the hospital was where the injured Sasuke retrieval team had been placed. In their own beds were Sakura, Ino, Tenten, Hinata, Niji, Shino, and Naruto. Rin, despite her exhaustion, was the one watching after them. Everything seems normal. Rin notes internally, looking through the papers of her clipboard. Despite chakra exhaustion and surface-level injuries, they all seem fine. She taps a picture of Niji with her pen. He had really stumped her though. His chakra was much stronger and potent than previously recorded. Even something in his blood changed. He was the one least injured through, somehow. They had no medics on hand. So how does he have a huge scar where he was supposedly hit with a powerful arrow? Medical ninjutsu was the only thing that could cause something like that. And with how the scar looked, it had to be someone who was very skilled at it. She shook her head, going past the page. I'll just run the blood tests. I'm sure something will turn up that way. She heard footsteps down the hallway she was in and turned to see Shizun waving at her. Rin-san, how are you doing? She asks, walking up to her with a bright smile latched to her face. A sleeping Tantan in her hands. Rin gives a tired smile but is nevertheless happy to see the other medic ninja. Just fine. Maybe a bit winded actually. She adds with a small chuckle. Shizun leans in and surprises the medical ninja as she puts a hand to her head. Her skin was very warm to the touch. But it didn't seem like a fever. At least not a traditional one. Maybe a bit more than winded. She leans back and smiles reassuringly at her. I can take over a bit. I think you need to lie down a bit. You need some rest. Rin nods. She had been feeling like she needed rest but hadn't the chance. Most of the top doctors in the hospital had been killed by Kabuto and there were no more that could deal with the type of situation she was in except for Shizun or the Hokage herself. I'll do that. But I'll need to show something to you first. She holds out the clipboard for Shizun to see. It's in regard to a certain patient. XXX. I can't believe I'm about to have a genin team. Just my luck. Anko was frowning heavily, walking closer and closer to the makeshift building where the intelligence division would be based until further notice. She had just been informed that she would have to take on that sound brat that had been captured during the Sasuke retrieval mission. She loathed the idea in its entirety. Sai was behind her, following. He didn't know how to show it but he was pretty confused as to why she was acting that way. I don't get it. He thinks, curious eyes landing on her back. Why is she showing such distress over something so trivial? He hadn't been told anything but he had overheard talk about her receiving another student besides him. So he didn't understand what was the big idea if she was a jounin. They entered the building and had been led to the part where captives had been kept. Sai remembers very vividly of this part of the building. After all, he had been here not too long ago. Here we are, Anko-san. And Ambu shows them the room and nods for departure, disappearing with the speed of the body flicker. She opens the door to the room, and finds a wrapped-up Ibiki staring down a glaring red-headed teen. Their staring contest hadn't even stopped even through they walked in the room. Anko, this'll be your newest student. Ibiki says without breaking eye contact with said student. Those words cause her to though, and she looks over at Anko, seemingly sizing her up. Anko glares at her, not liking the feeling the runt was giving off. Watch where you stare, Rugrat. Those eyes of yours might cost you your life. Tayuya grits her teeth, briefly struggling against her restraints that bound her to the table. Don't think I haven't heard about you, Anko Madarashi. Orochimaru-sama's first plaything. She grins violently at the last words, but this causes unrivaled anger in Anko. Then I'll be sure to make you my plaything, she says viciously. Suddenly, Tayuya's body seizes up and she feels a tight restriction all over her body. Her eyes widened and, as if frightened, they roamed to the side of her head and she let out a gasp seeing the semi-giant snake wrapped around her body. Her eyes shot to Anko, thoughts running rampant through her head. When did she dash? That's enough, Anko. He stands from his seat briskly. Let her go. Now. Anko blared one last time before letting the snake back into her sleeves. He watched the girl's body slacken and relax before she begins to breathe heavily. She turns to meet Ibiki's eyes. Sorry, she mutters. Ibiki merely closes his eyes. Don't worry about it. I won't report it to anyone. His eyes opened back to give her a death stare, showing he was nothing but serious. But don't let it happen again. She is useful for information on Orochimaru. Your job is to protect her for now. So do it. Well, you heard him, brat. Off your ass. Triple X. Hey Sakura. All the other genin slept away in the middle of the night, leaving Naruto to finally wake up for the first time, and the first person he saw was his teammate across the room, all wrapped up just like he was. He laughed at the coincidence. Hey Sakura, isn't it funny the dash? He trailed off when he saw the Pinkette's face when she looked up at him. Warm tears ran down her face and she was shaking as if she were cold. She forced herself to look at him, but could barely see him through her tears. And Naruto, she forced out, gritting her teeth and trying desperately to keep the tears from showing by covering her face. I am so sorry. Sorry? He echoed in confusion, eyes wide. What are you apologizing for? He tried to get up but a searing pain in his ribs forced him back on his butt. Ouch. For that. She answered quietly, trying to wipe the tears off her face. If I were stronger and able to help you, then you wouldn't have gotten injured fighting Sasuke. That isn't your fault, Sakura. He shot up once more and that pain inflamed in his ribs once more, but he simply winced and was able to get to his knees on the bed. He doubted he'd be able to go further though. Sasuke he struggled to find the right words but wasn't given the chance to finish. This isn't about him. She yelled back, and more tears falling. You had to save me so many times. I never even contributed to a single mission. I was never even a factor. Sakura, he muttered. Don't try and tell me any different. That fire in her voice had simply went away, shriveling up like a burning fish. It's the simple truth. Anger welled up inside Naruto and he gritted his teeth in a futile attempt to hold it in. How do you think I feel? He yelled out. Sasuke's gone because I couldn't defeat him or get him to see reason. It's my fault he's gone. Because I wasn't strong enough. It's neither of your faults. Both genin swiftly turned to where the familiar voice had come from and saw their sensei leaning on the wall beside the door, hands in his pockets as usual. Sensei? When did you get here? Naruto was sure he hadn't seen the man when he woke up. He didn't even hear the man come in. Sakura averted her gaze quickly, desperately trying to wipe the tears off his face and sniff of the accompanying snot. She hadn't heard her sensei approach her and hadn't known he moved until he touched her hands and removed them from her face. She looked at him and he sent her a joyful eye smile. It's okay to cry, Sakura. There's no need to hide it. Those words started the waterworks once more, but this time she was crying in his masked hand. He patted her on the head and looked back at Naruto, who smiled at the scene. I haven't been the best of senseis. Kakashi admitted. It's my fault if either of you think your skills are inadequate. And Sasuke, he paused to sigh and took a seat on Sakura's bed, in front of the kunoichi. He's my responsibility. I was supposed to be taking care of him and now he's joined up with Orochimaru to who knows where, so don't blame yourselves when you have someone to blame. No sensei. Sakura said with all the seriousness she could muster. Kakashi in particular had never heard her as serious as that before. This blame is on all of us. It isn't just on you. I refuse to blame it all on you. Me too. Naruto agreed strongly. I'd never put all the blame on you, sensei. Kakashi paused, his one revealed eye wide in surprise. He had always put the blame on himself, he was used to it. His parents' death. Obito's scar. His own sensei's death. He had always took the blame for that, shouldered the burden. But these guys dash. He picked up Sakura and walked over to Naruto and grabbed them both in a group hug. You're both our good children. I'm lucky to have cute and adorable students like you. The pain in Naruto inflamed once more. Sensei, that hurts. You're crushing me. Sakura uttered out. Triple X. So you're really leaving? Sakura asked, standing by the village gates to see her teammate off. Yep. He answered and his hand tightened to a fist. I have to get stronger. To bring Sasuke back to the village. He paused and smiled. And to become the Hokage after that. Behind them were the rest of the members of the Konoha 12 and the Uchiha clan. Even Obito was there but stood in the shadows, watching. He threw his fist high into the air. I'll come back as strong as ever, Sakura. He gave her a large close-eye grin. I'll be the one to bring Sasuke back. She smiled back at him, but this was more competitive. I don't think so. Sasuke's is mine for the taking. Okay, brat. That's enough flirting. Jiraiya walked up behind Naruto, laying a hand on his shoulder. We gotta get going. We got a lot ground to cover. Right. Naruto nodded. He turned after Jiraiya did and waved a goodbye at all his new and old friends. He left the Leaf Village behind to get stronger and come back more powerful. Sasuke. I will bring you back. And I will become the Hokage. Chapter 55. Side note, this is the start of the sequel. A spiral appeared in a snowy region and a man slipped out of it silently. Wind blowed against him hard, and snow was everywhere. It seemed never-ending. He began to walk, using chakra to stay above the thick snow, not wanting to get wetter than he already would've. So similar to my world. Back home. He thought. But it wasn't. He was in an entirely different dimension. And it wasn't his own. After 2.5 years of searching for a pathway, he finally found it using chakra he absorbed from his fight with Urashiki. It's a one-time thing through. So I'll have to find everything I can get my hands on. He walks for what feels like hours, but he doesn't react to it. He's on guard. If there is somehow a monster stronger than Urashiki or Kagaya, then he had to be ready to fight them. He would not be caught off guard and killed away that redundant. He finally comes across a dark, stone castle-like structure in the middle of the snowstorm. His eyes narrow at it and locks to it. That's his destination right there. A digging sound catches his ears and a second later a pale figure in dark clothing shoots out of the ground quickly, aiming a blade up in his face. While it was indeed fast, for Obito, it was like he was moving in slow motion. He aims his hand down and swiftly smashes his head into the ground hard enough that the thing breaks on contact with the ground. A puppet? He questions internally. His senses blare warnings at him and he looks up in the air to see 3 identical figures high above in the air. They all dive down at once, aiming their blades to slice him in half from the head down. Obito sees this and merely raises his forearm to block. The blades shatter against his skin, shocking the puppets who all land around him, trapping him between. Obito channels chakra into his left eye and it turns into the legendary eyes of the Sage of the Six Paths, the Rinnegan. They all rush him at once, but he merely opens his palm and extends his arm outward. His Rinnegan glowed darkly. Almighty push. An invisible force slams into the puppets and knocks them away into pieces that fall to the snow like blocks. Obito's eyes swivel around for the next set of enemies but finds nothing but a barren landscape once more. He narrows his eyes but continues to the castle-like structure nevertheless, though he is now more on guard than when he first arrived. He made it to the front of the castle before a voice stopped him from entering. "Stop right there, mortal." Obito turns around to see who has spoken up. He's surprised to see someone that looks like he's part of Kagaya's family. His face was delicate looking and he was dressed in what seemed a white, traditional clothing. He stared blankly at Obito and Obito did it back. It was sorta like a staring contest and neither had even spoke. Obito breaks that silence, his patience low and the anger of seeing yet another Otsutsuki weighing his thoughts. "Who the hell are you?" he asks. The being only gazed at him passively, almost as if he were ignoring him talking wise. Obito followed his gaze and quickly found the alien was looking, not at him but his eyes. He narrowed them a millisecond before he rushed forward, surprising the alien with his speed as he had reached him in a single second. Obito sent a blade through his chest and tackled him all at once. Obito's eyes widened when the alien turned into an illusion that simply faded away. An illusion? My Sharingan and Rinnegan should allow me to see any. How was I fooled by that? His internal question couldn't be answered when the chakra signature appeared once more. Obito turned, the alien stared back at him from above, this time atop the broken castle. He rose his hand into the air slowly, and Obito grounded himself to ready for anything. He snapped, and 100 of those puppets he disposed of hopped in between the two. He controls the puppets, huh? He saw no puppet strings though. So how is he controlling the puppets was the question. Or is he summoning them? Regardless, it still didn't explain how they moved. I didn't expect a mere mortal to know about this place. Or even have access to it. The air around him was different from the others he had faced. It was almost regal. In a way. What secrets do you hold? Obito remained silent, only observing the enemies before him. He would be the ones to ask the questions. A sudden burst of speed caused Obito to run right past the puppets so fast that they couldn't even move their eyes to react to him. It was like one moment he was there and the next he was gone. So fast. The alien thought in surprise, staring into the eyes of the Uchiha. His hand shot out, aiming to grab him by the throat, but something happened. His environment changed. He was no longer before the alien. He caught himself before he fell to the ground, using a handstand to right himself before landing on his feet. Damn it! He thought in frustration, gritting his teeth. The only reason he was able to access the dimension was because of the chakra he collected from Urashiki. But now that was all used up and he had no way of getting back. He looked at the hand that had almost touched the alien in frustration. If he were just a little faster, then he could have learned so much more. He didn't even learn its name. How did he kick me out of the dimension? Obito didn't see anything specific happen. There was no way neither his Mangekyo or Rinnegan hadn't seen anything. Something about that whole thing gave him a bad feeling. He took a look around his surroundings, finding himself on a large hill surrounded by large trees. It kinda reminded him of the village. I suppose it's time for me to return. Triple X. What a nice day. Kakashi Hatake remarked contentedly, the beam of the sun hitting his skin in just the right spots. Most would think this would be a time for running around in the sun. Others would think sitting in the cool AC and letting the heat pass them contentedly. Some would even think of a cool dip in a pool to cool them off. But Kakashi wasn't most people. To read, that is. He took out the infamous orange book that had accompanied him to even battle. Despite reading it so many times, he never grew tired of it. It was like the more he read it, the more he seemed to love it. Reading those first few pages in relative silence was bliss for the copy ninja. Other than the distant sound of bustling civilians and shinobi alike, it was a nice silence. Kakashi. Your youth is severely lacking. Kakashi sighed in dejection. Why did Guy always seem to find him when he got comfortable? It was like he had a tracker on him or something. He buried himself into the book, hoping it would be enough to get rid of Guy. It was not. Catching up to his rival, Guy slid to a halt before his ultimate rival. A wide grin stretched across his face. It's time, Kakashi. For a youthful challenge between ultimate rivals. Kakashi forced himself to smile and tilted his head. Sorry Guy, I'll pass. Guy's face fell comically as Kakashi attempted to get past him. He actually did, but it didn't last long when Guy performed a backflip and landed in front of him. Kakashi could feel the stares of onlookers and wanted to groan in embarrassment. He didn't know what was keeping it in. You can be serious, my rival. Do you not care about youth? He asked, pumped up so much that his fists were balled into fist and he couldn't stop moving. Kakashi rolled his eyes and held out a fist. Fine. How about a game or rock, paper, scissors? Guy gasped drastically, pointing accusingly at his fist. You dare want to channel your youth in such a haphazard game? Kakashi only stared at him. It's either this or nothing. This is the only thing I'm willing to play. He said in monotone, completely serious. You guys must like embarrassing yourselves in public, don't you? Both Jounin turned to look behind them, finding the owner of the voice to be someone familiar. Ganma? And Hey 8? What are you doing here, Hey 8? Kakashi looked at the recovered shinobi with a small smile. The man had recently recovered from a surgery. Rin had been in charge of that, completely cleared his debilitating disease. His skills had already shown such an improvement that he had been named a Jounin only a mere 2 weeks after coming into active duty. I was under the impression you were going to try out for the Black Ops. I convinced him not to do it. Danma answered, and Hey 8 laughed a bit at the memory. Yeah, he sure did. Hey 8 answered with a nod. I still want to do it though. But I already know what Lady Hokage will say. It's because you want to be there to be around Yugo. Ganma regarded him with a strong voice. That will only jeopardize the mission as well as your judgment. I know. Geez. You don't have to be so harsh about it. I'm over it now. I for one think that it is a youthful ideal. Guy yelled out in joy. Who wouldn't want to be with their beloved? Kakashi wanted to die of embarrassment from just being around the man-child. He settled with a simple scratch on the back of his neck. Do you have to yell out everything you need to say? Anyways, Ganma muttered, taking back the attention. He jammed a finger behind him. The others are at the Jounin station if you guys want to go back there. Kakashi hummed before making a decision. No thanks. I'd rather read my book and enjoy the sun. And he would like nothing more than for Guy to go off somewhere and start bothering someone else. Hey 8 smirked at him. You sure it isn't so you can sneak off and enjoy some alone time with your beloved? Kakashi rolled his eyes at the teasing look the three men were sending his way. If I wanted to see Rin in private, I'd be living with her. Speaking of that, Ganma said, giving him a confused look. Why haven't you had Rin move in with you already? You're not dense, you know she would say yes. What's holding you back? Nothing at all. Kakashi answered coolly, brushing past them. I heard Anko's got some sort of gambling tournament going on. Let's go check that out. As the copy ninja walked her off, Ganma sighed. I really hated when he deflects hard questions like that. It's more annoying when you know the answer to it as well. Hey 8 only crossed his arms. Sometimes he really didn't get the Jounin. Yeah, I get what you mean. Triple X. The four ninja arrived at the Jounin station about 10 minutes, much to Kakashi's chagrin, and found themselves in the middle of a dispute. You can't just bend the rules like that. That's not how this game works. Oh, suck it up and pay me. Don't be mad 'cause you lost. You cheated. screamed incredulously. Hey, hey! Hate said, getting in between the two voices which were Anko and Shui. Calm down you two. What's going on here? Shui glared at the snake mistress, struggling to contain himself from jumping over the jounin. He had just been robbed by her after all. She cheated in her stupid gambling match. He pointed an accusing finger at her. Oh, would you quit whining? Geez. I already told you that it wasn't particularly on purpose. She definitely cheated. Kakashi muttered. Everyone turned to see the jounin leaned over the table, looking down at the dice. He softly flicked it, and when it landed on the same spot, he already knew what it was all about. I'm surprised you fell for something so easy, Shui. Shui gaped before slapping himself on the forehead. Ah, there's no way I fell for that. Guy later him on the back. Anyway, why don't we take a seat? Kakashi suggested with an eye smile. I'm sure that's better than standing up and all. It wasn't long before they were all seated, all settled except for the fact that Shui and Anko were glaring at each other. Ganma sighed. Just get over it already. She won, you lost. Just don't get tricked again. Oh, you don't have to worry about that. Shui closed his eyes in annoyance. I'm never playing with her again. What's going on with you guys? Looks like you want to kill each other. Asuma walked up to the table closely followed by Kurenai. Let's just try not to bring it up. I might start an argument again. Hey 8 said as the two took their own seats. Anyway, I heard you were recommending your team for the upcoming Chunin exams, Kurenai. Ganma said, chewing on his sunbon. Kurenai nodded. Of course. While Hinata and Kiba are strong enough to become Chunin, I think Shino is stronger than me. So when I heard that they were upcoming after all these years, I decided it would be best to go ahead and add them. She explained before looking over at Kakashi, who had been reading his book. But Kakashi, I'm surprised you haven't recommended Sakura. It's not like I can. Two of her teammates are absent. The Chunin exams are for a team of 3. The copy ninja explained, never taking his eyes away from his book. Why don't you just register her on my team? Asuma asked. Shikamaru's already a Chunin, so he can't register with Ino and Choji. That could work. Shui said, finger tapping his chin. What about you, Guy? You recommending your team? The spandex-wearing ninja nodded enthusiastically. But of course. All of my cute genin are more than capable of the level Chunin. Especially Niji. Kakashi added. That boy. He was really one of a kind. Kakashi had kept an eye on him ever since he heard that he bested Hayashi in a training spar where neither held back. It had been both intriguing and difficult to watch the Hyuga train when he had the Byakugan, but it was certainly worth the while. Oh yeah. Kurenai said, looking at Guy. I heard he beat both you and Rock Lee at the same time and that he is the strongest Hyuga in recorded history. I don't even know how he isn't already a jounin, to be honest. I'm sure Lady Hokage had heard about it if we have. That would be my fault. Guy admitted. I've intentionally held him back. Everyone looked at him with utter surprise, and even Kakashi put away his book. He hadn't heard a serious guy in a long time, and this really gained his interest. Why? Shui asked. He doesn't have that innocence, I suppose. He answered before humming and putting a finger to his chin in deep thought. Well, he was never innocent in the first place, but when I saw him he still had the eyes of a child somehow. Sometimes he did childish things. But now, even though he gets along better with his team and family, I can't help but think it's a different reason entirely from what your student did, Kakashi. Guy just noticed how he seemed to understand and want to work with his teammates and family despite just a week earlier not wanting to. Even after the Chunin exams, Niji had been mostly silent and agreed if the team did something and tried to work with them, but after the Sasuke mission he just seemed to know them. As if they'd been friends for years. Guy couldn't help but think something had happened. So you held him back because something was wrong with him? Kurenai asked. What I'm surprised with the most is that you could gather that on someone as distant as Niji. Asuma praised lightly, most wouldn't think he was that observant. I'm surprised he was able to get that over those pompous Hyuga. Anko said. No way they would allow one of their strongest to just stay a genin. That's the thing. Guy started, looking up. Hayashi-san was the one who agreed. He saw the change in Niji before I did. That shocked them all even more. So it's true then? Anko asked. Something's really wrong with him? I think so. Guy's face grew more serious, like he was staring down a tough opponent. But what I do know is that I will figure out the change in my precious student. No matter what. Triple X. Itachi was atop the head of the third Hokage, aimlessly staring down into the village, just taking the scenery in. He hadn't done this in a while. Between missions, training, and becoming the clan head for the Uchiha, he hadn't much time to just enjoy the beautiful village he lived in. It was something he never wanted to take for granted. He felt a slight shift behind him and then a chakra signature he recognized instantly. Sensei. He regarded without turning to see the older man. The older Uchiha grunted but said nothing more, opting to walk from behind him to his side, overlooking the village as well. Itachi could tell he admired the view as well. You're finally back after all these months. Did you find what you were looking for? Obito had left on a trip almost a year ago, telling him that he had something to find and had to check it out. Itachi remembered how urgent his tone was and simply nodded instead of asking where the man was going and what was there. He regretted that. I did. Came the monotone response. It was short, almost rude. Itachi could tell something about it bugged the Uchiha. Maybe something happened to it? Whatever it was, it had to be important if it put Obito in this bad of a mood. He hadn't seen the Uchiha quite like this in a while. That's good. I'm to be named the official 10th Uchiha clan leader in the coming weeks. The date's not been confirmed yet. The sudden change in topic seemed to be what the older Uchiha needed, as it somewhat broke him out of his thoughts and he was much more engaged. Good. Now all that paperwork won't have to be thrust on Yukaina. He was barely in the village, so working on all of it became a real bother. Luckily his wife volunteered for it and was a quick study. She even said she found it quite fun, in fact. Obito had no idea how sitting at a desk and writing all day was fun, but it wasn't like she had much else to do. Itachi chuckled, finding that amusing. He had barely been able to train because the princess finished most of it every time he came around to start on it. She always told him she couldn't help herself. Well, I suppose she'll still be doing it if she wants. I think it gives her something to do other than clean all day. Yeah. A comfortable silence befell the two quickly. Neither were talkers and hadn't much to talk about other than serious topics. In fact, out of the four Uchiha left, they talked the least frequently. Itachi felt the sudden need to spring up conversation. Sensei, I was hoping to ask you a question. Ask away. Came a quick reply. When you told Shisui and I about the chakra you stored in us, I always wanted to know how you obtained it. Obito didn't react much besides taking a small, quick breath. Sorry, Itachi. I'll tell you about it another time. I have to go. Itachi watched the man body flicker away and sighed. He had scared away his own sensei again just because he had to be so curious. He knew his sensei didn't like sharing after all that happened to him. He lifted his hand to his face, peering at it as if it were an unnatural occurrence. 6 paths chakra, huh? He couldn't help but think just how much power he held now was thanks to this special chakra. It might actually be the reason why he didn't lose his vision after usage of his Mangekyo Sharingan after all these years. Obito will have to tell him how he came across this power eventually. Until then, he would give him some much-needed space. Triple X. What a great success, Shizen-san. Rin was writing down the conditions of a rather troublesome patient after the surgery that saved his life. Rin hadn't thought it was possible to save the man after half his heart had been split, but somehow, Shizen saw a way and made it happen. It wasn't a piece of cake either. It was a very complicated procedure with barely any time to waste. A testament to her skill. The woman before her was tired but was just as happy, feeling this success as the start of a new practice in the medical field. Potentially, this was a game changer for a field medic. It was capable of being done in the field, although one had to move fast. I know. This could potentially change the percentages of our in-mission deaths. We could decrease it by at least 7%. We do have a bit of kinks to work out though. Using chakra to pump the blood around the body while sealing the sliced heart is taxing on the chakra, so we'll have to label this as a forbidden technique until further notice. She explained, finishing her writing and lowering her clipboard. We can ask Lady Hokage her opinion if you want to. No, that's fine. She already has too much on her plate now. She beckoned the slightly older Kunoichi with a wave. Now let's go and have a little meal. Lunch is one me. Wow. You're in good spirits, aren't you? She never usually paid for their meals, so she had to be really happy right now. You bet. In another part of the hospital, Sakura was in the end of healing a patient and finished after a couple of seconds, letting the green glow from her hands disappear. She was proud of herself. Not a scar left in sight. The patient smiled, looking at his arm in admiration. Thanks, Sakura. Looks good as new. No problem, Kiba. She was happy to help anytime, but he needed to be careful. He got off the chair he was sitting in and stretched himself out, his muscles popping. But you have to be careful about getting those scratches. The sun's out, so a lot of plants got bacteria on it and that could cause infection. Yeah. Okay, Dr. Sakura. She raised her hands to placate him. Just trying to help. She smiled at him for the teasing. And you know I'm not a doctor, Kiba. It's called a field medic. Kiba raised an eyebrow, seemingly he hadn't heard the phrase before. What's the difference? I thought you did the same stuff my sister did, well, except with humans instead of animals. Well, I do, but not quite. Mostly I'm just a medic on a battlefield. You know, to help the injured keep fighting. Oh, that's what that is. Kiba shrugged. All that means is that having you on the team makes everyone fight longer. He threw her a grin full of his feral fangs. If you were on my team, I'd probably be able to go wild without worrying about hurting myself. She sighed and shook her head. Maybe she shouldn't have said anything. Kiba always had the wrong ideas. You never seemed to be worried about that anyway. What would Mai say if she heard something like that? Mai? He laughed. We're just friends with benefits. She's not my girlfriend or anything, so why would she care? Sakura wanted to bash his head in. Had he not really realized that she was in love with him? Or did he not care? Either way, both didn't help the attitude he had towards the women populace of Konoha. In fact, his image of them were pretty carnal. Kiba seemed to notice the look on her face. Hey, he drawled. What's with the look? Oh, nothing, Kiba. She was thinking about giving the animal lover a speech about respecting woman, but he would either not get it or not even care. All he cared about was having a good time. Okay. Anyway, I was gonna meet up with a couple of our friends for some barbecue. You down? When do you get off? Sakura turned to the wall and looked up at the clock, surprised to find it already afternoon. Well, now actually. Guess you are my last patient of the day. I'll come with you guys. Sweet. But how come you're off a little early? I thought you worked all day. She nodded, walking past him and out of the room. She heard his footsteps close behind her, a telltale sign he was following her. I do, normally. But the Chunin exams is coming up, and just in case Kakashi-sensei recommends me, I have to be well rested and focused. But the Chunin exams can only be entered with teams of 3. And, you know, Naruto and Sasuke aren't here. He said the last part with a bit more tact, knowing it was a touchy and sore subject for her after one particular bad joke from the Inuzuka put him in the dog pound with just about all their friends until he apologized. She knew he meant nothing by it and continued to speak as if he never said anything about them. Yeah, but Ino's team is missing a member if they join because of Shikamaru, and so is Tayuya's team. I could join either one of those. Kiba seemed to grow a bit angry at the mention of the latter. Oh yeah. But I'd say join Ino's. I wouldn't trust a team of two traitors. Kiba never trusted the duo under the tutelage of Anko because of their ties with enemies of Konoha, perfectly mirroring how most of Konoha felt about the team of three. They were mostly known as the Traitor Three. It wasn't a good look, but neither of the three seemed to care about it at all. Most of the Konoha rookies thought that way. Sakura hadn't even hated Tayuya even though she broke the Kunoichi down. Sakura knew that was what she needed. To face the reality of her weakness and overcome it. Of course, telling someone as thick-headed and stubborn as Kiba was not ideal. She may be stubborn as well, but she wouldn't fight the Inuzuka on his way of thinking. At least not right before the Chunin exams. She needed other things to polish up before then. Yeah. I hear you, Kiba. I'm serious, Sakura. Those two are people I would trust with someone as strong as Akamaru. Who are we going to find? I'm hungry. She changed the subject, not liking where it was heading, but she wasn't lying. She had skipped breakfast because she had woken up late and now her stomach was on the verge of growling. He sighed, but noticed how forceful the change was and relented. Hinata, Shino, Choji, Ino, and Tenten. With you and me, that makes 7. Why only us though? What about Niji and Rock Lee? She knew he would never agree to let Tayuya and Sai come with. Tayuya probably would decline anyway, and she knew Shikamaru was one of the known proctors of the Chunin exams. Niji's training with Hinata's father and no one can find Lee. He's probably training though. That train-oholic. One day he was going to seriously hurt himself with all those dangerous stunts. But no one could stop the teen when he heard talk of Gaara being a Kage. He screamed about not wanting to get left behind and trained even harder than he usually did. Sakura really didn't think it was possible. She sighed in exasperation. Those two are too much sometimes, I swear. Especially Lee. He always seems to get himself hurt. Sometimes it's honestly ridiculous. Kiba just kept grinning. I like the way he trains. He's trying to keep pace with someone like Niji, so obviously he's gotta put himself through the ringer and then some. You're just saying that because you train with him sometimes. His grin never left his face. Guilty as charged. Anyway, let's go find them. I'm starving too. Triple X. Izumi was in heavy thought. Her next move would decide the outcome of this battle. Normally she wouldn't have the time to sit and think, but this was no ordinary battle. This was a battle of wits. A battle of decisions. And a battle of physiological strength. Her opponent was none other than the master of his craft, Shikaku Nara, the head of the Nara clan and the Jounin commander of the Leaf. Unlike her, he appeared calm and composure, only staring at the board blankly. Almost as if she were bored. The hot bloatiness in her wouldn't have took that standing down. But that had already happened many times before, and it caused her to lose the game in a single move every time. She figured he was teaching her that if she lost control over her thoughts and emotions, that mistake would cost her everything. In a way, that had already happened. I could have brewed and drink a whole cup of tea before you made a move. Your enemy won't give you the time to think. Shikaku goaded, face remaining unchanging. Izumi growled internally. She already knew that. But she knew that this a part of his plan. She had froze up after the words Sasuke had spoken. She couldn't even move then and watched, crying as Sasuke deserted the Leaf. She had chakra. She had a working body. She couldn't physically stop him. But she couldn't make a decision fast enough. That had caused her nightmares many nights, and she had only begun to get better when she took out Shikaku. He had always made calm decisions on the fly and they had almost always worked in his favor. She wanted that same power. But she didn't know it was going to be this hard. How the hell did a clan renounced for its laziness get this analytic and decisive on the fly? The answer was never clear to her no matter how many sessions she had with Shikaku. And every time she asked he didn't give her anything to go by. With slight apprehension and a bit of nervousness, she lifted her hands toward a pawn piece and moved it forward. Her eyes scrutinized the board, desperately trying to make sure she didn't make a critical mistake and give her opponent the game. She moved the piece because it had been the safest and least piece she moved. And still it was a mistake. It wasn't with the piece itself but rather a knight he moved up to take over her bishop, something she didn't even consider because she wanted to play it safe. Just because you played it safe doesn't mean your opponent will. Don't risk a safety of a pawn for the safety of an asset. Izumi closed her eyes and fell back, the relief her back felt from debending after having did it all day comforting her despite the loss she just took. Shikaku raised an eyebrow. "It's your turn. What are you doing?" "I quit," she said in a pout. "My king is basically surrounded and I have nothing but a single knight and 2 pawns left. You have me outnumbered and I'm nowhere near close to your king. And that makes you wanna quit?" Izumi sat up slowly until she was back into a crisscross seating position. She frowned at the Jounin commander. "What's that mean? Isn't it just as smart to know when you're outclassed and retreat? You said you were nearly surrounded." He pointed to her king. "How would you retreat if your king is surrounded on all sides?" "I wouldn't," she answered quickly. "That means I just lost like I said. Surrendering is not an option. You basically surrendered when you said you quit," he pointed out, much to her annoyance. She crossed her arms over her chest. "Well, how would you get out of this situation?" He didn't speak and simply moved until he was over the board entirely and she moved to the side to see what his next moves would be. He first moved her pawn to the up, closer to her king but not far enough away that the bishop he couldn't move until he was right beside the king. He moved the same pawn again, this time right in the path it could go, and since it couldn't move sideways it only had the option of getting rid of the pawn. This allowed the king to escape behind trapped and be a space right above his own bishop. He decided to stop there and look at her astonished face. A pawn used to sacrifice for the king is a common misdirection used in both battle and shogi. But what about after that? How do I win? Look at the board. My units are spaced out even though they all aim for the same thing. Now that your king is out, you don't have a single move that could end this fight? It took Izumi a few seconds to see it, but when she did it was like it was before her the entire time. Simply all she had to do was move forward. Astonished, she looked back up at him to see him smirking. She figured it out far faster than he thought she would. She moved the pieces in place and soon she surrounded his king while keeping what he would do in mind and had actually won the first time ever since they did this every couple of days. Sometimes one doesn't need a master plan or even a way to exploit a weakness. Sometimes they just need to move forward with what they have and then they will succeed. Izumi smiled at him, unable to help herself and hug him even though she was his commanding officer. "Thank you for all your help, Shikaku-sama." He indulged her a bit and patted her on the back. "No problem." They separated. He almost teased her about the embarrassed blush staining her cheeks, but let her have it this time. She just beat him after months of trying anyway. "Sorry, Commander." She bowed. "My emotions got the best of me." "Oh, please." He waved off. "As long as it's not on the battlefield I think we can both agree that it's okay. Would you like some tea, Shikaku-sama?" They turned to see Yukaina walking in with a tray of tea in hand and he gratefully nodded and took a cup, savoring the exquisite taste as Izumi began putting the shogi board away. "Thank you for being such a dear, Yukina-san. I'm sure Obito doesn't know what he's missing." Yukaina didn't even react to comment of her husband and bowed. "You're welcome, Shikaku-sama." Shikaku got up from the table and stretched. "I'll have to bring the dish back, Yukina-san." As much as I would love to stay, I've got paperwork concerning the Chunin exams to help finalize and planning for all the participants. Izumi stopped in the middle of getting rid of the shoji board off the kitchen table. Yeah, I heard about the exams. But I don't understand why we decided to help the San on such short notice after 2 years. We're all still recovering the blow dealt by Orochimaru and Danzo. We can't recover if we don't push the new generation to gain experience. Experience makes shinobi stronger and more skilled. Only prodigies can be pushed without that, and even then experience beats that out. Shikaku explained, grabbing his jacket. Izumi, be prepared. You might be called for a jounin meeting later. He sent a nod Yukina's way and left without another word. Sorry to use your table for my training, Yukina-san. Izumi had been here when her training needed to be done and she just used her table kind of without asking. Yukina however sent her a warm smile, wiping down the area where Shikaku had spilt a bit of tea. Do not worry about that. It's good to have some company over. Speaking of that. She trailed off in her thoughts, not willing to cuss out her sensei even though he totally deserved it. He left his wife for months at a time without so much as a word and only left Kakashi a vague letter and an half-assed apology. She usually had to apologize to Yukina in his stead, but she always accepted it with a blank face and a matter-of-factly way. Izumi knew it was a facade, but she didn't think she was able to break it. She was sure only Obito could, for some reason. Please don't think like that, Izumi-san. I can tell by your face that you're thinking of my husband. Can't help it. Izumi grumbled. Honestly, I don't know how the hell you put up with that. It's completely ridiculous that he just leaves like that without a word and then comes back and never apologizes to you. It's ridiculous. I know. My husband just has his demons that he tries so hard to alleviate. I've known about that since I've been with him. She went to the sink to clean the towel she had just used. I've never had a full conversation with him, but I feel like I understand him more than I should. He just needs space. Izumi really think he needed the exact opposite, but she couldn't make the princess do that unless she wanted to. And right now she didn't. She sighed. Okay, if that's what you think. But I still think he at least has to apologize. Yukina giggled a small bit. She looked out of the window, wondering just what he was doing at that very moment. That smile turned to a small frown. I really hope he's doing okay.